Day 9 of trip from here in North Pennsylvania, heading toward Gettysburg. Up ahead is, well, you probably can't see it because of the sun. Well, now you can. You may think that's maybe 3 or 4 motorcycles. That is actually more like a convoy of motorcycles. It started out originally as 5 and then more people joined in. And now they were originally going like 70, 80. Now they're going maybe 40.
The American Civil War was to commence. General Meade was put in command of the Army of the Potomac, 93,000 strong and in desperate need of a victory. One of the first things General Meade did was to send a division of cavalry under the command of Union Brigadier General John Buford north to scout for Lee's forces. When General Buford reached the town of Gettysburg on June 30th, he immediately began receiving reports of Confederate activity in the area. Buford, a seasoned veteran, was convinced that a major confrontation was imminent and recognized the importance of the high ground south of Gettysburg. Carbine from one of his troopers and fired the first shot of the battle. Following the opening shot, Buford's cavalry were methodically pushed back closer and closer to where you are currently caught. Now remember, Buford's main objective is to hold the Confederates west of Gettysburg until the Union infantry can arrive and take over. Buford is specifically holding out for one man in particular, Major General John F. Reynolds, the left-wing commander of the Army of the Potomac, and widely regarded as one of the best Union Corps commanders. So respected was Reynolds, in fact, that when President Lincoln sought a replacement for General Hooker as the head of the Army, Reynolds was top on his list. It was not until after Reynolds turned down the command for mainly political reasons that President Lincoln then ordered General Meade. The First Corps arrived on the scene. These Union troops were not just any volunteers. They were the famed men of the Iron Brigade, the Black-Hatted Boys. The men of this brigade were universally recognized by their regular Army black felt hardie hat they wore. Volunteers from the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Indiana, these soldiers had developed a rugged reputation for fighting hard as iron. Arriving near this location, Reynolds noticed the Confederates coming through the woods and personally took command of the Iron Brigade, yelling, "Forward, men! Forward! For God's sakes, forward!" As the fighting commenced, Reynolds turned to look for more reserves when he was shot in the back of the head. He was dead before he hit the ground, the highest-ranking officer to be killed in the Battle of Gettysburg. The marker atop the mound of earth visible to your left marks the approximate location where Reynolds was slain. The men of the Iron Brigade did not fail their command. The 2nd Wisconsin led the way. The American Civil War was more than twice as large as modern rifle bullets. It was made of lead. It had no metal jacket like modern bullets. And most importantly, it traveled at a slower speed. The combination of these attributes had a very specific and frightening consequence to a soldier struck by a musket round. When a lead bullet hit an arm or a leg, the soft lead would mushroom out and shatter any bones in its path. The standard operating practice for shattered limbs at the time of the American Civil War was amputation, and there were many of these, considering a well-trained soldier could load and fire his weapon 3 times a minute. His standard ammunition load was 40 rounds, but many commented on his experience during the Mexican War with the smoothbore musket, stating, "At a distance of a few hundred yards, a man might fire at you all day without your finding it out." What all this really meant was that in terms of battlefield action, the advantage was shifting from the offense to the defense. The tactics of previous wars, tactics like massing large groups of soldiers together and charging the enemy in mass, were no longer effective. A defender, armed with rifled muskets, could now inflict significant casualties on an attacking force before it reached its target. And so, with historical hindsight, it is easy to understand why the vast majority of all frontal assaults failed during the American Civil War. Here at Gettysburg, one of the greatest frontal assaults in military history took place on the 3rd and final day of the battle. It was called Pickett's Charge. Later in the tour, I will tell you how that assault fared. This dedication marked the last of the great Civil War reunions. Approximately 1,800 veterans attended the ceremony. Their average age was 95. And while these old veterans of the blue and the gray now stood united, in 1863 they faced each other as mortal enemies on this very ground. The hill where the Peace Light Memorial sits had a lot of strategic value at the time of the battle. As you can see, Oak Hill is one of the highest points west and northwest of town. Occupation of this hill gave the Confederates a broad field of fire. From here, they could blast the Union First Corps, positioned on McPherson's Ridge. Controlling high ground is paramount to both armies during the battle, as it was during the entire Civil War. That is why Oak Hill was so important on July 1st, 1863. Just as Little Round Top, Cemetery Hill, and Culp's Hill were important geographical features on the subsequent days of the battle. Oak Hill was also the staging ground for one of the most ill-fated attacks of the first day's battle. At around 2:30 in the afternoon, Confederate infantry emerged from the woods on Oak Hill all around where we are currently parked. Looking out across the Moon Barn would be the site of one of the biggest ironies of the battle. The Civil War was known as the War of Brother Against Brother. This certainly would prove true on the afternoon of July 1st. Elements of the 45th New York Infantry Regiment from Syracuse, New York, were ordered to the barn and surrounding areas to flush out Confederate sharpshooters. One of the soldiers present with this Union regiment that day was a corporal by the name of Rudolph Schwartz, a German immigrant. As Schwartz was heading to the barn, he spied Confederate prisoners being taken to the rear. One of the men he caught sight of was his own brother, dressed in a Confederate uniform and fighting with the Southern troops near Oak Hill. Immediately the two men embraced. Then, parting from one another, the Confederate brother was escorted to the rear. And sadly, later that afternoon, Rudolph Schwartz, the Union soldier, was killed in action. Now, at the same time that you have the right end of the Union 11th Corps being overrun, the Confederates launched a series of attacks up here along Oak Ridge and along McPherson's Ridge. The attacks came fast and furious, and the Union First Corps here on Oak Ridge was later established, like many other roads in the National Park, to mark the lines of battle, basically to show the visitors where the Union and Confederate armies were positioned during the Battle of Gettysburg. And for the 2 days of July 2nd and July 3rd in 1863, tens of thousands of Confederate soldiers were positioned and maneuvered all along this ridgeline, from here all the way south to Auto Tour Stop Number 7. Another element of Lee's army that was present here on July 2nd and 3rd in great numbers was the artillery. At the time of the battle, there were over 600 cannons present with both armies. Today, there are about 400 stationed throughout the park in positions that designate their actual field locations during the battle. Almost all of these are authentic Civil War cannon barrels. You will notice primarily two types of cannons as you drive through the park: rifled cannon and smoothbore cannon. The smoothbore cannons are principally the model 1857 Napoleon cannon. These are easily distinguishable by their long green barrel. The other major type of cannon used during the battle was the rifled cannon. These are the thinner black guns.
Alright, we're here at Little Round Top. There's supposed to be a spectacular view up top, so here we go. Weird bird. Wow. Oh man.
That's from the spine.